This is The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media. Now, here's Jason Jones.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to The Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, broadcasting from the hill country of Texas. Today, back on the show is John Zmirak, and we are talking about Planned Parenthood and the occult. Margaret Sanger and demons. And no, I'm not kidding, and no, this is not hyperbole. You are going to want to listen to the entire show. You are going to want to listen to the end. It's a short show. It's not even an hour. It's not one of these 3-hour shows. You're going to want to listen to the end. I'm going to get on with the interview, but before I do you want to stay informed? Do you want to stay free? Well, to stay free, you have to be informed. So what are you going to do? Watch MSNBC? Read the New York Times? Come on. No, you're going to read the Epoch Times. Go to ireadepoch.com. Use the code Jason Jones. 1 month, $1. You're going to love it. Then, with Jason Jones, a whole year, $77. Get the print and digital subscription. Your kids read the paper. You got the digital subscription. Perfect. Go to ireadepoch.com. It's everyone's favorite paper. It is mine for sure. It's number four in the country, I think, in circulation. Let's make it number 1. This episode is also being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project. I talk about this at the end of the show. I'm going to tell you now. Today's been a good day. Some young Ukrainian women, we've been working to get out of jail because they presented themselves at the border the way the United States told them to, and then were sent to jail for 90 days and having to go to a court and prove who they were and where they were from. They're getting released tomorrow, it looks like. And also a young woman we've been trying to move to safety from Afghanistan for a very long time will be in her permanent destination in the next couple of weeks, maybe this week. And our first medical center that we're building for women is going to be complete by August 1st. And we have cameras up in some schools and a university in Afghanistan. All this happened this month. A lot of it happened today. Today was a big day. If you want to be a part of everything we're doing at the Vulnerable People Project, go to thegreatcampaign.org, and you'll be a part of the great campaign to advance human dignity against a globalist culture of death. So go to thegreatcampaign.org, give your best one-time gift, and become a monthly donor. All right, now for everyone's favorite guest, John Zmirak on The Jason Jones Show. Here we go. John Zmirak, welcome to The Jason Jones Show.
Hey, Jason, always a pleasure.
I've learned not to doubt you, but I just can't believe you sometimes when you're pitching me articles that just seem just over the top. It began with like 10 years ago when you were talking to me about these illiberal Catholics that have mutated into the integralists. And then you were telling me about these revelations you discovered about Margaret Sanger in the occult and her father and some of her mentors. And I believed you, but it was hard to believe. Your latest article is shocking. And it's depressing. It is shocking. And then when you realize the darkness that entered the United States through Margaret Sanger, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, you think, Mark, remember that until a couple of years ago, presidential candidates like Hillary Clinton were gleefully accepting the Margaret Sanger Award from Planned Parenthood. This is not some marginal figure. This is not like some Ku Klux Klan leader from the 1920s that everybody's forgotten about. This is one of the most influential women in American history. So let me tell you a little bit about it. The article is entitled The Demonic Origins of Planned Parenthood, Part 2. Part 1 was all about the comparatively light, benevolent side of Margaret Sanger. The fact that she was a eugenic racist who started a sort of Darwinian pseudoscientific sex cult. That's the light, cheerful, happy, family-friendly side of Margaret Sanger's past.
That's the part that Planned Parenthood celebrates.
Yeah, or at least it's, that's the part they only apologized for like a year ago. It took until last year for them to stop giving out the Margaret Sanger Award and to take her name off the clinic she founded in the East Village in New York. And I think New York City took down the plaque the sign on the street sign that said Margaret Sanger Place. It's just too much evidence that she wanted to sterilize black people because they were black. But again, that was the bright, airy, respectable side of Margaret Sanger. And I recommend to everyone they read the book, Blessed Are the Barren. It's by two pro-life researchers from the early 90s, published by Ignatius Press. Blessed Are the Barren documents how Margaret Sanger was a sexual radical who favored a kind of Hugh Hefner playboy mentality. Really, it was the ethics of the Marquis de Sade, sort of just total sexual freedom without any regard for consequence. And the idea was to let women be as corrupt and as irresponsible as the Marquis de Sade was. That same ethic was the one that Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre picked up. They picked it up from reading the Marquis de Sade. So Simone de Beauvoir mainstreamed the Marquis de Sade sexual ethics through her book, The Second Sex, and her activism sort of creating what they call second wave feminism. Well, Margaret Sanger wanted to peddle this sexual ethic in rather conservative early 20th century America. So she did it under the cover of eugenics. She went to all these liberal Protestant churches and warned them that their nice, good American congregation was going to be outbred and outvoted by these grubby immigrants coming from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe and Ireland. These Catholics and these Jews, people like my ancestors on both sides. As the authors of Blessed Are the Barren document, she was trying to overcome social disapproval of contraception. As of 1920, contraception was something that only prostitutes used. It was illegal in many states. You couldn't send it through the U.S. mails. Talking about it was considered scandalous. She wanted to make it respectable. So what she said was, we must make contraception legal and widespread in order to keep down the number of people born with low IQs. And her organization, Planned Parenthood, managed to get mandatory sterilization and or castration for people who failed culturally biased IQ tests in 13 American states. 60,000 Americans were sterilized against their wishes by the government, thanks to laws that Planned Parenthood got on the books. And the German Nazis actually modeled their sterilization and eugenics program on Planned Parenthood. They invited Harry Laughlin, Margaret Sanger's right-hand man, to Germany for a whirlwind tour. He got Nazi awards praising him for inspiring the German eugenics program. And again, this is the nice part of Margaret Sanger's story. In part 2 over at Stream.org.
John, can I start you there real quick, though?
Yeah.
You know, everything you just said right now, Keith and Becky, they're two interns at the Alan Guttmacher Institute. They're following our series, taking detailed notes. Keith and Becky, they don't believe you, right? They hear that, but they're not going to investigate it. Isn't that strange? Like, they hear those accusations, and they're just like,
they could do it. If they want proof, they should just sit down and watch MAFA 21, MAFFA, MAFA 21 Black Genocide, which Mark Crutcher and the good people at Life Dynamics made, and it documents all of this. And it even interviews one of the last black women sterilized against her wishes in the 1960s in North Carolina. She was a rape victim being raised by her grandparents. She was 13. She was raped, and when she was in the hospital giving birth, the authorities told her grandparents that they would take away their welfare checks unless they agreed to let her be sterilized. She was one of the last Americans sterilized against their wishes through Planned Parenthood's eugenics laws. And it interviews her and the son whom she bore, the child of rape, who is now the light of her life. But anyway, let's get to the rest of the story.
The unbelievable part.
Yes.
But true.
in the article, and I have to thank this fellow, and he's called himself, his handle is Schwab, and he has a Substack, and I found this article in his Substack account, and I subscribe because he is a diligent researcher. He's got an article called Margaret Sanger, Daughter of Sorcery. In it, he documents how Margaret Sanger's father sexualized her at a young age, sleeping in bed with her. He took her with him to dig up the body of her brother who had died a few weeks before. They took out his body and they made a death mask from his skull and took a clipping of his hair and brought it in as a kind of a charm or something. Her father was a socialist radical and a sort of very embittered, failed guy. She later became devoted to someone named Havelock Ellis. He was famous in the 19th century. He was a friend of Oscar Wilde. He was one of the founders of the Fabian Society, which was the leading socialist organization in England that still exists. In fact, the Fabian Society founded the London School of Economics. Most people don't realize the London School of Economics was founded by socialists to promote socialism. Anyway, Havelock Ellis was a very strange man. He was obsessed with sex, even though he was impotent. He liked to conduct orgies. He liked to invite all the weird sexual offbeat perverts of his age to have orgies at his house. He would observe them. He would write reports. He would have various sexually experimental couples would write up reports for him. He took a strange interest in pedophilia, in ancient and modern accounts of pedophilia sex. And he also was involved in spiritualism. And Margaret Sanger was fascinated by him. And I document from the Margaret Sanger papers that are archived at New York University that Margaret Sanger was obsessed with Havelock Ellis. She went to England, hunted him down, had an affair with him. She supported him financially for many years. She would dedicate 2 issues a year of her birth control review to promoting Havelock Ellis's views. Well, Havelock Ellis was into spiritualism. And a lot of the people who were the sexual experimenters whose case studies he wrote in his interminable books on various sexual perversions, a lot of them were engaged in seances. So he kind of combined pseudoscientific 19th century Darwinism with occultism, with channeling spirits and seances. Well, one of the weirdest things I've seen about Margaret Sanger in her book, The Pivot of Civilization, and in her other book, she talks about how if we free people, especially women, of their sexual hang-ups, of their Christian morality, of their bourgeois conventional ideas of monogamy, if we free women from these prejudices, they will give birth to a higher race of children. That the sexual energy we have, if it is not repressed by these archaic and obsolete reactionary views and forces, the children who are born will be a super race and will be like a race of gods living in an earthly paradise. And she says this explicitly in several of her books. Now, if she's just dealing with science and Darwinian science, that doesn't say anything like that. There's no promise of that in Freud or even in Marx or in any of the biologists of her day. So where was she getting the idea that if we are totally free of any sexual repression, we can give birth to a race of gods? Well, this article shows the connection. She got it from spiritualism. 19th century spiritualists of the kind that Havelock Ellis was introducing Sanger to, they believed that if you're poor or unhappy or oppressed, or if you come from a reactionary religion like Christianity, that puts an impression on your unborn children, and they will be born inferior. They will be born marked with that darkness, like the way like a camera lens, when you take a photograph, if there's something influencing the photograph. On the positive side, if a woman is free and self-assertive and aggressive and utterly untrammeled by morality, her children she can channel into her children higher spirits. Higher spirits. Now think about it. You and I know when you engage in the occult, sometimes spirits show up, but they're not godly spirits. They're not angels, except maybe fallen angels, demons. So Margaret Sanger believed in a spiritualism which will allow you to channel demonic forces into your children to make them super beings. And furthermore, in some of her feminist writing, she refers to the women in past centuries who fought for reproductive freedom. And she calls them martyrs and talks about their sacrifice. But in fact, what she's talking about are the abortionists of the ancient world, the abortionists of the Middle Ages, witches. So she's talking about the redemptive sacrifice of unborn children as part of channeling spirits to create a race of gods. Now, with all this as your background,
worked. But you know what? I think it worked. I mean, look at Bill Gates. Doesn't he look like a god to you?
Well, his father was a Planned Parenthood board member.
But this is what they would get. With all their nonsense and mumbo-jumbo and occultism, you get a creep like Bill Gates. That's their god right there.
But here's the final important part. Currently, the Temple of Satan is one of the leading pro-choice organizations in America. It is filing legal briefs claiming that abortion is a religious ritual protected by the First Amendment, and it's trying to keep abortion legal across America by making this claim. Now we can see where they get it from. Margaret Sanger intended abortion as a religious ritual to these unborn babies from the less valuable, inferior, not eugenic children. These will be the sacrifices that allow us to channel demons into our wonderful super race of elite superior children. That is literally the spiritual background and the psychological mindset on which Planned Parenthood was founded. And this is a major organization with a $500 million budget, getting government funding, selling baby parts to be used for the dead baby vaccine today.
And it couldn't be more obvious. It's like right, it's right there. And I Googled this guy.
Havelock Ellis?
Yeah, and then I looked at for Amazon and some of his books. You could buy all of his writings for like $1.99. So I did that. And then it gave me suggested reading. Do you know how they always want to upsell you, sell you other products? So I bought the complete works of Havelock Ellis.
Oh my God.
After reading your article for $1.99. And then it recommended a bunch of books that were written by Nazis in the 20s and 30s. You may also be interested in this. And it was all these books on race and racism, the occult. So it tells you who's buying Havelock Ellis today.
Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense.
Eugenicists and racists, occultists.
Right. Well, when you drive out the true religion, you create a void. And something rushes in to fill that void. And it's nothing wholesome. It is the old religions of Canaan. Let's remember what the Hebrew prophets were preaching against. Child sacrificing fertility cults that dominated all of the Middle East except for Israel. And look, it took over Carthage. The city of Carthage practiced infant sacrifice. And if you've ever read G.K. Chesterton's wonderful book, The Everlasting Man, he talks about how one of the most powerful things driving the Romans in fighting against Carthage in the Punic Wars was their disgust at child sacrifice, which was universal in Carthage. And it was weirdly similar to what we see today. When you look at the Aztecs, right, they sacrificed adults, prisoners of war. They killed them because the Aztecs believed that their gods were dying and needed blood from human beings to keep them alive. That's crazy, but at least it makes a kind of weird metaphysical sense. In Carthage and in Canaan, they believed that they could buy favors from the gods by sacrificing infants. So it wasn't that they needed to do this to keep the world from ending, which is what the Aztecs believed. No, in Carthage, you would sacrifice your firstborn child in the confidence that the gods would make you rich or would help you succeed in politics.
You wouldn't have to quit, like today. You wouldn't have to quit college. You get that promotion.
Right.
You get elected U.S. Senator. You're a state representative.
Right.
You're a Democrat. You're a governor of Arkansas, and you're pro-life. Well, you want to be president, Mr. Clinton? Yeah, well, you better bow to the gods of the city and start supporting child sacrifice. Oh, all right, I'll do that. All right. I mean, Bill Clinton was pro-life governor of the year in the 80s, I think 1986.
Wow.
And, very
and think of
similar.
all these young women are told you can't have a career, you can't succeed, we have to have abortion so that if you get pregnant, your life is not sidetracked. But we just had the woman, I think it's Jennifer Grey. She was the actress from Dirty Dancing. And she just gave her story about how having her abortion allowed her to star in Dirty Dancing. And Dirty Dancing, by the way, was pro-abortion propaganda. It was written with that intention. And if you remember the plot of it, Jennifer Grey becomes a dancer to fill in for one of their dancers who's having an illegal abortion.
You know, my friend Nicole Scherzinger was in the remake of that, and she had called me and said, I don't want to do it. You know, my papa is pro-life and I'm pro-life. She'd said, I wouldn't even say this, but she had said in a magazine that she had talked to her friend and said, you should do it. You should do it, because I think her family didn't want to do it. I said, I think you should do it, but you should show how your character is transformed by the abortion and inject some realism into it. And so she had said in an interview that she decided to take the part because it's all on how the actor portrays that event.
Right.
Because if you look back to, we need to do a whole, we got, 34 days left of this. Maybe we can do a breakdown of each of the, these movies that center on abortion, from Officer and a Gentleman to Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Do you remember the abortion scene in Fast Times at Ridgemont High?
I remember becoming traumatized by it.
It's even more traumatic not in the 80s, because in the 80s in movies, it was just kind of bizarre and to think that was a kid's movie in the 80s, right? Your parents, you'd say, Mom, Dad, can we go see, get in the car, kids, we'll drop you off at the mall and put down your lead, when you're stopped, for those youngsters listening, when John and I were kids, we played with lead, toys that were painted with lead paint. Our parents drove cars where they put lead gas while they smoked unfiltered cigarettes in the cars with the windows up with air conditions that were horrible. And then when we became teenagers, they would drop us off at the mall to see movies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High because that's what kids were supposed to watch. But if you watch that scene, the guy that gets her pregnant is much older. I don't know how much older, if he was a senior and she was a freshman, but he looks to be out of high school and seems like a freshman. And
it's always statutory. It's probably statutory rape.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I should go I might do a whole show on that, and then look at the age gap. And that was just like, yeah. Right. No, but you're right. It was done. Do you remember that scene in Officer and a Gentleman, when she says she's pregnant, she fakes that she's pregnant, and
I don't remember.
He says, "Why don't you tell her to get an abortion?" And he's like, I can't. She's Catholic. But abortion crept up in a lot of movies where I think they meant it to be pro-abortion propaganda, but just dealing with abortion it's repulsive. Like the dismemberment of children. Hard. It's kind of hard to propaganda.
It's very hard to sell. It's hard to sell that unless someone is engaged it actually been drawn into a demonic cult. And that's why the Temple of Satan is the natural spokesman for abortion. And Planned Parenthood is the natural spokesman too, now that we realize it was founded as an occult satanic organization from the beginning.
John, the reason I wanted to have you on about this article is I was driving back from Muay Thai. We were talking on the phone about this article, and I said when I first read it, it seems to me that the left, especially in the early 20th century, when Chesterton said of these folks, he was speaking of these folks. He was probably thinking of Havelock Ellis specifically, but he said, it's funny, those who have abandoned a belief in God will believe anything. It's not the people who don't believe in God don't believe in anything. They'll believe anything, something like that.
Well, that's right. There's a really entertaining literary feud between G.K. Chesterton and Aleister Crowley.
For real?
Yes. Aleister Crowley and G.K. Chesterton panning each other's books in the press. It is fun to follow that.
How do I find that? Where do I find that?
Just Google Chesterton and Crowley, and you'll come up with it. Yeah, they lived at the same time.
I know of that. I might have Dale Ahlquist on. I'm sure he's an expert on just that debate. I'll read it and have him on. That is absolutely unbelievable. Think of two diametrically opposed human beings. Like, one is this beautiful, brilliant, simple man. Another is this dilettante,
pretentious,
perverted moron.
Pervert.
Yeah.
But do what you will with your whole be the law.
Do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. So, really, Margaret Sanger was to Satanism, to the occult, to Aleister Crowley, is sort of as L. Ron Hubbard was in a way, where L. Ron Hubbard's goal was to take Aleister Crowley and make it palatable to the majority of Americans.
That's right. He and Jack Parsons of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory spent the early 1940s trying to give birth to the Antichrist, taking written instructions by mail from Aleister Crowley. And when that didn't work, he founded Scientology instead.
Yeah, his son, I forget his name, Wolf, I forget his name, but his son wrote about walking in on his father performing an abortion on his mother and then raping her after the quote-unquote procedure.
Wow.
Which is it true? I don't know. His son said it. Kids say things about their parents that may or may not be true. But it was definitely a lunatic. But the reason I wanted to have you on is we were driving. I said, my children and I and my wife, we sit around at night before we pray. We talk about theology, philosophy, whatever. And last week I was talking to my kids. Do you ever sometimes feel like you're just a pure spirit? Sometimes you ever feel like you're just an animal? I mean, it's strange. We're creatures that write poetry. And we're creatures that get monkeypox and have diarrhea. It's very weird, right?
Yeah.
Human beings are very weird. How we reproduce, the digestive system, all of it, to me, I don't think stars are weird or black holes are weird. I think humans are uncanny and strange. And so when I read your article, I thought that was the debate that was going on in the mind of the godless in the 19th and 20th century, right? That they were stuck between baboons and devils. One minute they thought they were devil, and one minute they thought they were
just animals,
just chimps. Then the next minute they thought they were gods. They were Lucifer himself.
Right. Walker Percy talks about this brilliantly in his book Lost in the Cosmos, the last self-help book. He says that the advances of modern science after Descartes helped give us much more power over our own lives and an ability to extend our lives, more control over our lives. But they also encouraged us, on the one hand, to see our bodies as machines and our souls as ghosts. And that's what Descartes famously believed, that we were ghosts trapped inside machines. And he thought animals were just machines. He claimed they couldn't feel pain. He claimed they didn't have any emotions. They were just like wind-up toys. And a lot of the cruel experiments, the vivisection of animals that took place, still taking place, Fauci and Beagles, a lot of the cruelty of the treatment of animals was inspired by Descartes' theory that they didn't have emotions and didn't really experience pain. And that comes from the sort of disjointed worldview that comes to us in modernity. And Percy talked about how scientists tend to not really important major scientists, but people with a popular scientific worldview, people who watch Bill Nye and watch Cosmos and read Newsweek science articles, they tend to alternate between acting like animals and fantasizing that they are gods. But the one thing they can't account for is the human self, is free will, consciousness, our sense of immortality, our sense of the unique value and dignity of a human being. Think about this. The same people who claim that abortion is okay because there's nothing sacred about human life, they think the gender identity of Bruce Jenner is sacred. And you're actually, you're doing something horrendous if you misgender someone. If you don't honor which one of the 47 genders somebody claims to identify with on a given day. What animal has that? Which of the animals has 47 genders? Which of the animals has contraception and abortion? Which of the animals has that kind of radical freedom? None. But yet they claim we're fundamentally no different from the animals. It's like they want to pretend that we're just animals in order that they can act like demons.
Yeah, I think that's it. Or they're act like they can't control themselves, right? So they make a break with God. In Graham Greene's beautiful novel, The End of an Affair, it's sort of, you have to make this decision, and then they just drift into the occult. Because I've thought, I do this spiritual exercise at night, every night almost. When I go to bed, I will try to think of God, the human family, the human race, God, man, and the world through different theologies. And I think if I'm an atheist, how would I want to live? And I would be a transhumanist. Like, I have the desire to live forever. But with these freaks, it's not even as if they're all elitists, right? It's not like they want to bring the human race into eternity with them, to become gods with them. They're gods, and other humans are just weeds to be rooted out and destroyed. They're tyrannical gods. They're not kind or loving or merciful or just gods. They're brutal and they're ruthless gods.
Just like all the pagan gods. None of the pagan gods are particularly benevolent. It's interesting, isn't it, that the Greeks and the Norse and the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, none of them viewed the gods as particularly benevolent.
Definitely not trustworthy. You couldn't count on them. They might be benevolent for a time, but they're not someone whose love and affection is you could count on.
It's really interesting when you think about that. Nobody else came up with a benevolent, all-powerful God. That's not something that human beings would invent. It's something that had to be revealed to them.
Yeah, there's nowhere else where that stream entered into the human family. So even those of us who, although I was an atheist, our atheism was a Christian atheism, right?
Right.
Ayn Rand she would have smacked me for saying it. She was a Christian atheist.
Or at least a Jewish atheist, an atheist from Judaism, still formed by Jews. She still had a sense of rectitude, a sense of there being commandments, a sense of human beings having inalienable rights given to them by nothing at all, just out of nowhere.
The axiomatic was her line when she was backed up against the wall. It's axiomatic.
In fact, which means I'm making it up. Or as Joe Biden would have said, the thing. The rights that come to us from the thing.
Well, that's what made me leap from a Randian. I always knew it's axiomatic wasn't an answer. I mean, it is an answer to some things. Some things are but it wasn't an answer to why I shouldn't take advantage of weak people, why I shouldn't sleep around and then give a woman money for an abortion. It wasn't an answer to any of that. Well, I guess she would have said you should sleep around, and if she gets pregnant, give her money for an abortion. That's what she would have said.
Yeah, I mean,
but I was a pro-life Randian, so I was confused out the gate.
Ayn Rand can't account for human relationships and family life. I would say that's a flaw in a philosophy. I always say that communism, Marxism, is a terrific political philosophy if you're a termite or a bee or an ant. And libertarianism, secular libertarianism, is a great political philosophy if you're a lizard that abandons its eggs in the desert to hatch on their own. It's just that neither of these worldviews happens to fit the human species.
I would argue with you. I think libertarianism is a great philosophy for young conservatives between the ages of 18 and 24.
Well, right, but
so you can behave like a lizard. So you can behave like a lizard. But when you want to stop behaving like a lizard, you have to move along.
You have to adopt a political philosophy for mammals. There we go. There's the title. We could do that book. A political philosophy for mammals.
Well, and if you look at Ayn Rand, and I despise people on the right who bash Ayn Rand or the left. I mean, this was a woman who was standing up to Stalin at great personal risk to herself when nobody else was. And I understand Ayn Rand. She was a woman who heard Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox Christians talking about, God and love and charity, and then there were pogroms that her family had to deal with. And then the Bolsheviks showed up talking about the brotherhood of man, and, they brought hell on earth. So she if Ayn Rand heard someone speaking using, the language of altruism, she assumed they were about to try to kill her.
Right.
Because that was her experience. So
Did you ever read the essay about her by Florence King in her book with Charity Towards None? She has a whole chapter on how she thinks Ayn Rand's political philosophy emerged from fear of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, that's, what? You've told me to read this book before. I ordered it. I have it. It's on my shelf. Every time you and I talk, which is daily, books go on my shelf. Some of them get touched. Some of them don't. This has not
I'm an
yet.
Expensive friend to have.
You are expensive, but I'm a bibliomaniac, so it works out well. And it's tax deductible because we're writers, so we can write that off.
That's right.
But here's the deal.
That's right.
I agree, 100% agree with her on that, right? I mean, I think anti-Semitism was the foundation. And then maybe as a young Jewish girl in Russia, if not for the Bolshevik Revolution, she probably would have drifted towards leftism or something. She would have probably drifted to that. But she had the unfortunate experience of meeting Bolsheviks up close and personal.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
And that's what I think with the work that I do with the Vulnerable People Project, or the work that we do. What animates me is I think the greatest scandal to a person's relationship with God is violence. That is the stumbling block. A rape. And now that we know, I learned from you that Margaret Sanger was raped, right? I mean, isn't that what I got from... Not raped.
Okay. She was, it was just about inappropriate sexual contact, like her father sleeping in bed, but she just recorded that it was sleeping. So I wouldn't go as far as to say she was raped. She was sexualized by inappropriate contact, probably like the stuff that Joe Biden's daughter talks about, like her dad showering with her and stuff. I mean, just crossing boundaries and destroying someone's innocence and their sense of integrity and their sense of safety and their sense of self-respect, even without necessarily it going into full sexual violation.
But when I read the way she expressed it, her father, she woke up, she was half dead. And maybe she's just the pervert, right? Like, she's half dead. Her father, as creepy as he was and into the occult, what he did to his son was a strange expression of love, right? Did we talk about that? He digged his son up they went at midnight and dug up the grave and made the cast. Maybe he thought he was losing his daughter and he was just embracing her out of heartbreak. I mean, who knows? But the way she says it is she was sexually awakened in the midst of death. She's half sick. I mean, she's half dead or more than half dead. She's very sick. So I don't think that it would. I felt like she was speaking between the lines, saying that her father had molested her.
It's possible. I'm being cautious because
be cautious.
I'm making a lot of shocking claims.
True.
And they're all 100% literally true. So anything speculative, I want to label as such, just to keep clear that on all the really shocking, crazy stuff we've talked about, it's all documented.
Yeah, and I'm going to put the article in the show notes. You guys have to follow John at the stream. Your article today, unbelievable. I didn't get.
Okay.
I just read it after our conversation.
Let's do another show on that.
We'll do another show on that. I'll tell you, John. We had a crazy day here today. We're getting some Ukrainian girls out of jail tomorrow who presented themselves at the border as they were told by the Biden administration, and then were promptly thrown into jail where they've been sitting for 90 days.
Oh my God!
We're getting them out tomorrow. And we have installed cameras and hired security guards for some schools in Afghanistan. Some of those schools, the first round of schools are being wrapped up this week. And then by the end of next week, we are opening up women's medical centers and in Afghanistan.
Where?
In Afghanistan.
Okay.
And our first center is going to be done. And this is to serve the religious minority communities that are being decimated the way the Christians and Yazidis in Kurds suffered by ISIS with Obama's catastrophic policy. And this is just our attempt to reclaim a bit of our national honor.
God bless you. Keep it up.
So it's been a busy day. So the story that you wrote about that we'll talk another time, we'll tease it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about it till I read your article, and I watched the video, and I thought BLM is absolutely unraveling. Did you see that right now Latinos are statistically Republican in the latest polls?
Wow.
Because
they're not crazy.
And guess
They're
what?
not insane.
Black America's coming our way. This nonsense that I saw in your article, Black America's coming our way. David French has a good article for once in his life.
Wow, that in itself is the kind of miracle we could attribute to the consecration of Russia.
Well, what I think is going on, his latest article on this note, I think, he's a spy in our camp and he's concerned. So his latest article is like, hey, dear liberals, your godlessness is freaking out minorities. Your godlessness is scaring blacks and Latinos. Stop with your godless speech. Stop with your godless speech.
Right.
You're losing black. That's what he's saying. He's like, oh, but he's right. Yeah. And then it dawned on me. When I worked for Karl Rove, he said something. When I worked for the RNC, we were in a meeting, and he said something. He said, the Democrats do not care about the black vote and the youth vote at all. They care about soccer moms. And so they feign concern for children and minorities because that's who soccer moms care about.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he was right. I mean, guy was a very clever guy. He was right.
Oh, yeah.
What's going to happen, the only demographic that votes that the Democrats are winning right now, college-educated, affluent white people. And they're voting, and they're identifying Democrat for one reason only. They don't want to be seen as racist. When they
and it's not a genuine concern about racism either. It's simply that anti-racism has become the class marker. It's the way of saying that you're better than other white people. You're
like
above such petty ethnic concerns. You're not a deplorable. In fact, you're sophisticated. You're cosmopolitan. You even speak a little kitchen Spanish to your kids' nannies.
And they're going to wake up after this November, I believe. This is. I'm going to make this prediction now. I'm going to let you go. They're going to wake up and they're going to be like, it's going to be an Episcopalian quilt convention. There'll be like 9 old white ladies in the basement. And their sons who still live at home in their 40s. That's it. And then they're going to look across the street at Greek Fest. It's going to be wild and diverse and loud and beautiful.
I'm very hopeful.
And they're going to say, oh my gosh, I need to go to Greek Fest. And I think we could be seeing the closing shop of the Democrat Party in the next 2 to 6 years.
Your lips to God's ears, Jason.
All right,
I need to run, but it was great talking to you. Let's do another show about these events in Minneapolis, which are unfolding. Basically, this was about the shooting in Minneapolis. This 20-year-old mentally ill black guy was shooting into his neighbor's apartment, almost killing her and her 2 small children, all of them black, by the way. She called the police. The police spend 6 hours trying to talk down the crazy guy with the gun. Finally, they can't, so a sniper takes him out. Black Lives Matter shows up to protest. The woman, the victim, his victim, shows up and starts arguing with the guy with the megaphone, and the whole thing falls apart. And that's my latest article at stream.org if you want to read about it. And I have the video of the confrontation between the black victim of crime and the white liberals who are shouting at her, "Shut up, you're still alive." He isn't.
By the way, you're right. All the BLM protesters harassing this woman, I don't know what ethnicity she was, her kids are half black.
She's a dark Hispanic, but at least.
Oh, yeah, Latino.
Maybe straight up black.
Yeah, I don't know what she was, but they're these just white dudes that look like they teach English at the local community college, or the English lit professors at the local community college, and they're harassing this working class woman. You can tell by the neighborhood. This isn't the rich. She's not living in, and she's got her kid in the car, who's been already traumatized because the kid saw a man try to kill the mom, and the Beagles are telling you to go feed him, John. But yeah, it's just,
yes, they are.
And I'm sure everyone listening knows about the story. I did not know about the story because we've been working really hard today on trying to save lives. By the way, all the lives we're trying to save in Afghanistan and Ukraine, or in jail here in America, the Biden administration is responsible for the people that are suffering in Afghanistan, these poor Ukrainian girls sitting in jail cells across the United States because they did what Biden said. They came here. And they said, yeah, you're going to have to go to jail, and then we're going to send you to some kind of ICE court.
Oh.
And they've been sitting there for 90 days.
The secret committee, formerly known as Joe Biden.
You know what my Afghan immigrant friend said to me today? When I sent him notice that just today the State Department said they're going to process the SIVs just in time for the November election. So we're coming up on the year anniversary of the catastrophe in Afghanistan. Today, the Biden administration has announced that they're going to begin processing these SIVs. Many of them have been set on fire and beheaded and shot. Well, why is it now? Because we're coming up on the year anniversary, and they're trying to set the news agenda. That's who they are. That's who they are.
We knew what we were getting. We really did.
All right, Mr. Zmirak, thanks for coming on the show,
God bless. Let's talk again soon.
All right, aloha. All right, everybody, that was John Zmirak. The articles are in the show notes. I appreciate John coming on. I had another guest they had to cancel. So it was curveball. When you do a show a day and then someone cancels, that's a big problem. But John stepped up, and I'm grateful. He's prolific over there at the stream. He is my favorite writer. He should be your favorite writer, too. So follow him. This episode is being brought to you by MyPillow.com. Go to MyPillow.com, use the code JONES, and you will get deep discounts on all Mike Lindell's products. Also, this episode is being brought to you by Epic Times. Go to ireadepoch.com. Jason Jones will get you a first month of your subscription for $1, for $1. So go to ireadepoch.com. Get your month subscription for $1, and I know you're going to want to keep it for the year. When you use the code Jason Jones, a year subscription is only $77 for the best newspaper in the world. And as always, this episode is being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project. We're moving. I'm telling you, we've had it's been a rough 3, 4, 5 months. But this week, we're moving somebody that we've been trying to move for a very long time to permanently be resettled. We're moving them from Afghanistan to a home, a permanent resettlement. This movement has taken 6 months to set up. It is happening this week. Also, as I said to John, we're finishing up our medical center and our wells, and also we've installed cameras in a university and a school, and we're adding another school this week. We'll be adding several schools in the coming weeks and months, and that's all thanks to you. And of course, we're continuing our fight for the preborn, not only in the United States, but around the world. Go to thegreatcampaign.org, become a monthly donor, and join the great campaign to advance human dignity and defend the vulnerable. All right, until next time, tomorrow, it's been Jason Jones with John Zmirak. Aloha.
This has been The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media.